Vietnam, the final chapter of the Mekong's journey through Southeast Asia, and the home of the river's delta. The Mekong Delta is one of the most biodiverse regions on the planet. A jewel in Vietnam's crown. In the canopy above, and on the mudflats below, the mangroves are bustling with life. But the ever-changing delta provides challenges for all that live here. From the dramatic daily tides to the torrential rains and seasonal floods, each animal has a unique story of adaptation and survival in this landscape forged by the Mekong itself. The upper Mekong Delta. A vast expanse of wetlands through which the river must flow before finally emptying into the South China Sea. Over thousands of years, the flat landscape has caused the river to split into smaller and smaller channels. Now the region is a dense maze of mangroves and winding waterways. A biological treasure trove. The mangroves are inaccessible to humans. This is a rare place where the animals still rule. The canopy rustles as the forest wakes up. Long-tailed macaques live throughout the mangroves. They nest overnight in the canopy above the channels. Once they're awake, they have only one thing on their minds: breakfast. Macaques prefer fruit, but it's May. The rains have only just arrived, so there isn't much around. With young mouths to feed, they'll eat just about anything. But a few leaves won't be enough to satisfy the hungry troop. This morning, they're looking for something in particular. A male seems to have found it, but he needs a good vantage point to make sure. Excitement quickly spreads through the troop as they climb down to the water's edge. They found a channel that's got just what they're after. The dominant male leads the charge. The others follow. These macaques aren't here to cool off. The water flows thick with insects, nuts, leaves, and seeds. Like a supermarket conveyor belt, it provides everyone with an easy meal. Macaques are competent swimmers. They have to be. The mangroves flood each year between July and November. Swimming is often the easiest way to get around. But that's not all. Macaques also rely on their swimming skills to escape danger. They have a number of predators: pythons, big cats, and even wild dogs. Sometimes leaping into the water below is the only option. This is why they prefer to sleep in branches over flowing channels. If they're surprised by a predator, all they need to do is jump. The splashing alerts other foraging parties nearby. Good news travels fast. It isn't long before the whole troop is making the most of the floating buffet. Macaques store food in their cheek pouches. This keeps their hands free to swim and allows them to collect as much as possible while they're in the water. Their aquatic ability also allows them to hunt for marine invertebrates, which is why they're also known as crab-eating macaques. They're very comfortable being underwater. But not everyone is quite so intrepid. This adolescent is still learning the ropes. He's right to be nervous. Pythons patrol these riverbanks. And he won't stand a chance if one catches him by surprise. It pays to be back up in the trees as quickly as possible. Except for a couple of well-deserved breaks, the whole troop keeps going for a couple of hours. Soon, cheek pouches are bulging. But not everyone has taken advantage of the feast on offer. This young mother has a problem. She can only eat if she gets in the water. But her baby is only a few weeks old and clings constantly to her belly. She can't afford to leave it unguarded on the riverbank. Other females in the group are fascinated by newborns and will sometimes kidnap unattended infants. She must trust her own instincts. Somehow her baby knows what to do. Once submerged, it holds its breath, then clambers around onto her back. She emerges with full cheeks and a very wet baby and heads up into the safety of the canopy to enjoy her spoils. The Mekong River is the foundation of all life in the delta. After a journey of 4,150 kilometers from its source in Tibet, the river flows out of Cambodia and into Vietnam. As it heads towards the South China Sea, the river passes through an extensive mangrove forest. The mangroves of the Mekong Delta are architectural wonders of the natural world. Their complex external root systems provide shelter for countless animals, both above and below the water. This diversity flourishes in a world that is constantly changing. These mangroves are tidal. Twice a day, water rushes in and out of these channels. Living in this fickle environment is a challenge. One that has sculpted the lives of many creatures. As the water recedes, a strange world emerges. These are blue-spotted mudskippers. It's low tide. A female pops up to see if the coast is clear. She's hungry. Mudskippers live in harmony with the tides. Twice daily, the freshly exposed mud provides them with an opportunity to feast. Swinging her head from side to side, she sucks up any small creatures and plants left in the silt. But as the mud dries throughout the day, sifting through the sediment like this becomes more difficult. Mudskippers have evolved an ingenious solution to this problem. She collects a mouthful of water, carries it to a drier area, and wets the mud to collect food off the surface. Their limb-like pectoral fins enable them to crawl or skip over the mud. It might look clumsy, but they're surprisingly agile. Mudskippers are amphibious fish and spend many hours a day out of water. They have gills, but also possess the rare ability to extract oxygen from a mouthful of air. They can also breathe through their wet skin. When they start to dry out, a roll in the mud does the trick. This terrestrial way of life exposes them to one particular annoyance that most fish wouldn't have to put up with. The mangroves are infested with mosquitoes, and mudskippers provide an easy meal. There's little they can do. Even a hasty retreat doesn't always deter these resilient pests. Being a fish out of water, mudskippers are also a welcome snack for hungry predators. Birds and even larger species of mudskipper are a constant threat. Their primary defense is their exceptional eyesight. This female rests in the shallows. With eyes on the top of her head, she has almost panoramic vision. She can spot predators, prey, and suitable males from afar. It's the middle of the wet season and time to spawn. Male mudskippers are fiercely territorial. They defend the area around their burrows, hoping to lure in any passing females. Most disputes occur at the boundaries between territories. Tempers quickly escalate. With some flamboyant posturing, the larger male is quick to see off his smaller rival. But it's the female mudskippers that are the real heavyweight fighters. They have larger territories, each of which contains several males, and they vigorously fight each other for control over these male harems. Females are less flamboyant than the males. They have a smaller dorsal fin with a longer central spine. This small female is on the edge of a larger one's territory. A fight breaks out almost immediately. With dorsal fins flaring, they wrestle. But the smaller female quickly concedes defeat, lowering her dorsal fin. She slowly backs away as the resident victor stares her down. For now, the males in the area remain out of the loser's reach. These remarkable fish share their muddy domain with some equally strange creatures. Crabs live here in abundance. They might not look too significant, but they are fundamental to keeping the mangroves healthy. Their small claws are constantly at work. Crabs are the engineers of the mangrove ecosystem, and unique in the way that they process and transform the muddy environment. They gather balls of mud and organic matter which they drag into their burrows. This aerates the soil and replenishes the nutrients in the silt. the crabs of the Mekong Delta, fiddlers are the most common. Like the mudskippers, their lives are defined by the daily tides. A single huge claw makes the male fiddlers instantly recognizable. They're detritus feeders and will eat any plant or animal matter they find. They sift through the mud with their smaller claws. It's this rapid movement from the ground to their mouths that gives these crabs their name. Appearing to play their larger claw like a fiddle. With two small claws, females can feed at twice the rate of males. The male's giant claw might come at a cost, but it's his prized asset when it comes to attracting a mate or fighting over territory. A larger male defends his burrow against a smaller opponent. But his work isn't done. Two more males quickly arrive. The larger one squares up to him. This combat might not look violent, but these crabs can generate a phenomenal amount of power. Claws are often crushed or torn off when neither crab concedes. The defender retreats. He loses his burrow, but at least he still has his claw. Although the mangroves are busiest at water level, a few creatures rise above the hustle and bustle. Brilliant white egrets punctuate the tree line. These little birds happily nest alongside different species. Other canopy dwellers prefer their own space. Each has its own neighborhood. Herons monopolize one area, cormorants another. The mangrove canopy becomes a noisy nursery where the delta's larger birds can raise their chicks in safety. Back at water level, the macaques have been feeding all morning. The whole troop has gathered for the feast. There is safety in numbers, but more macaques also means more competition. Some avoid the crowds in the water and try their luck foraging on the muddy riverbanks. When less food floats on the surface, they dig for crabs and other tasty creatures in the silt. Others head up into the trees. Eventually, the overcrowding takes its toll. Tempers boil over. But these skirmishes are usually short-lived. Although these macaques live in large troops, they don't necessarily enjoy each other's company. The larger the group, the less food there is to go around. If there are too many of them, aggression rises. Social behavior like grooming stops, and the macaques become visibly stressed. The stress manifests as an itch that must be scratched. Even the young are affected. The only solution is to disperse. A group splits away from the troop. Their change in demeanor is immediate. Grooming resumes and social harmony is restored. As the wet season continues, the Mekong slowly swells. Rain and floodwaters transform the flat, low-lying landscape, creating a vast expanse of lush wetlands. The arrival of the water triggers a population explosion of insects and other invertebrates. The basis of the food chain. Other animals soon follow. Thousands of birds flock to the delta wetlands to take advantage of the endless supply of food. Water lilies grow at an aggressive rate and quickly dominate the environment. They provide shelter for many aquatic creatures and a floating walkway for smaller birds as they hunt. Larger birds such as cranes and herons also patrol the waters. A few spot-billed pelicans make a rare appearance, while egrets and painted storks arrive in vast numbers. Storks stir up the shallows as they wade. Their large beaks trawl from side to side and snap up any fish that they scare out of hiding. These wetlands support a huge amount of life across the food chain. They are phenomenal ecosystems. The perfect place to raise a family. Pheasant-tailed jacanas are an unusual species when it comes to parenting. This male is part of a harem belonging to a dominant female. While she's off in search of more males to breed with, he's left to look after their nest. Females lay 4 eggs, and despite his attentive behavior, he has already lost 3 to predators. Like any first-time parent, he nervously awaits the new arrival. Having just emerged, this chick is at its most vulnerable. It must quickly learn to stand. With a little help from Dad, the tiny chick takes its first steps. Making sense of its giant feet doesn't take long. Jacana chicks are able to walk, swim, and dive only a few hours after hatching. The devoted father soon takes his chick out on its first lesson: how to forage in a floating world. Their giant feet allow them to spread their weight so they can walk across the lily pads. A second male in the harem has slightly more on his plate. He's expecting 3 chicks. The first arrived early and must wait for its siblings to catch up. For the next 2 months, their father has his work cut out for him. Then he'll leave them to fend for themselves. Having split from the main troop, this group of macaques is more relaxed. They're ready for their daily rest. It's well-earned downtime, and a chance for everyone to catch up. Mothers can feed their young in peace and quiet. Importantly, this is when grooming takes place throughout the troop. The jungles are full of blood-sucking critters, and it isn't easy keeping yourself pest-free. It often takes a friend to get to those hard-to-reach places. Grooming is about more than keeping pests at bay. It plays a vital role in maintaining troop harmony. Macaque troops have more females than males. Most females are elated, and they observe a strict hierarchy. This hierarchy dictates who grooms whom and for how long. A young mother shows her respect for the more dominant macaque by grooming her superior's baby, an act that requires a strong bond of trust. Dominant females enjoy a number of privileges within the community. They have a safer position at the center of the group. They also eat and breed before lower-ranking females. Their babies inherit these privileges. In this way, the hierarchy is sustained from one generation to the next. For the first few weeks of their lives, baby macaques are in constant contact with their mothers. This time together gradually reduces as they grow up, until finally the youngsters wean at about 6 months. After a good feed, most of these infants are more intent on playing than hanging about with mum. They might not be conscious of the importance of this playtime, but these youngsters are forging important long-term bonds. Female macaques remain with the troop for life. Through this play, these young females are laying the foundations for relationships that will last their whole lives. Young males follow a different path in life, and their play reflects this. At around 5 years old, just before they reach sexual maturity, they're forced from the troop to find another. This mixing helps keep the gene pool healthy. But life outside the safety of the troop is dangerous. Rather than face these dangers alone, the young males will form bachelor groups. They're wrestling now, but in a few years they will be relying on each other to survive. By November, the Mekong is at its highest. The river overflows far out into the floodplains. This annual cycle of flooding deposits nutrient-rich sediment across the region. Layer upon layer has built up over the last 6,000 years, during which time the delta has extended around 200 kilometers out into the South China Sea. The nutrient-rich sediment makes the region one of the most fertile on Earth. This fertility is the foundation of the delta's extraordinary diversity of wildlife. Just as the lives of many animals depend on the Mekong, so do the lives of the Vietnamese people. The Mekong Delta is the agricultural heart of the nation. Nearly half of the country's food is produced in the region. Goods are sold locally on vast floating markets or shipped out across the country on larger boats. It's one of the busiest places along the river. But all this industry comes at a price. As the rich fertility of the delta is increasingly exploited, the natural environment suffers. Only 10% of the region's natural forest remains. To the east of the Mekong, there are pockets of jungle that have survived human expansion. "40 meters above ground, the trunk of this dipterocarp looks like any ordinary tree. But it isn't. A flash of beak, the only clue as to what's going on inside. Nestled deep within the tree trunk is one of Southeast Asia's most iconic birds, the great hornbill. Great hornbills are a threatened species with only around 20,000 left in the world. This brilliantly colourful male has work to do. Inside the tree's hollow is his mate and their eggs. This monogamous species nests in the cavities of trees. Before laying her eggs, the female closes the entrance using mud, feces, and fruit pulp. She leaves a small slit, just big enough for a hornbill beak. And her partner feeds her through this tiny gap. With little foliage or branches, few predators can access the towering nest. But there's a price to pay. She must remain self-imprisoned for the entire incubation period of her eggs, and won't leave until her chicks fledge, a further 2 months. After feeding his mate, the male flies off to find more food. Great hornbills truly are one of nature's spectacles. The heaviest of the hornbill species, this male weighs almost 3.5 kilograms. It is said that the wing beat of a great hornbill can be heard almost a kilometre away. On top of his beak is the distinctive casque or horn. For hornbills, size matters. Larger horns are bigger beacons for attracting a mate. The male calls to his. A unique hollow structure inside the bill helps his distinctive sound reverberate for kilometers. Back at the nest, life is a waiting game. The male is his mate's only source of food and water. He regurgitates the berries he's collected from his crop. With a lifespan of up to 35 years, this incredible teamwork means that couples like this will raise many chicks in their lifetimes. With great hornbill numbers in serious decline due to deforestation, the survival of the species depends upon it. But there's hope for the Mekong Delta's wildlife. The Tram Chim National Park. A pair of Saurus cranes are the first to arrive from Cambodia. They migrate here each year for the dry season. These impressive birds have an almost 3-meter wingspan and can live for up to 80 years. The park was established in 1999 to protect the unique wetland ecosystem and the rare Saurus cranes that winter here. Sadly, there are fewer than 2,000 of these cranes along the Mekong. There are currently only around 30 individuals in the park. But their numbers are slowly rising. They are not the only ones in need of protection, and parks like Tram Chim are being established across the country, allowing many species to regain a foothold in the natural environment. The mighty Mekong's journey is soon coming to an end. The river's influence stretches far and wide throughout the upper Mekong Delta. As the nutrient-rich waters course through Vietnam towards the South China Sea, they leave behind a spectacular range of habitats. Resourceful macaques will make the most of their water world. Fierce female mudskippers will continue to battle it out on the mangrove floor. And in a few months, the Jacana chicks will have to fend for themselves. As the Mekong powers towards the Vietnamese coastline and its final destination.